that goes back to my service at the Whitaker Foundation that, as you know, had quite a bit of impact on the field, especially as far as education is concerned. And it was interesting for me to see how the educational process had changed over the years. And I kind of indicated that the very first period I would call was dominated by mechanical engineers, maybe electrical engineers, and it was really very classical. We were more like electrical engineers or mechanical engineers picking some problem. Then came the second phase, where I think the chemical engineers started to become more important because of the more biological content in biomedical engineering. And I think that's the time when people started to think that the undergraduate curriculum and certainly the graduate curriculum should include a little biology. So that was the second phase. The third phase is the one that I would consider started around 1990 or so, that coincided with two things. One was the biological advances. Certainly the Human Genome Project, everybody started to become interested in the basics of what causes disease, how we go from molecular mechanisms to cells, to tissues, to organs. And certainly there was a lot of advancement in the science. Dedicated the foundation to biomedical engineering. That was in 1991 when I joined the foundation. That dedication coincided with the biological advances. I think without the biological advances, the Whitaker Foundation would not have had the effect. I think we came at the right time. We probably were somewhat lucky, and as a result, it was very possible to have a lot of advances in bioengineering, biomedical engineering education. And those advances, to a great extent, were brought about by the biological advances. And so science of biology certainly advanced incredibly rapidly, and in my view might have had even more effect on the field than advances in technology. It was launched in 1976 upon the death of Mr. Whitaker, who was very much interested in the combination of engineering and medicine. And at that time, when it was launched, the governing committee did not plan to close the foundation, but it was aware of the desire of Mr. Whitaker not to have a foundation just for the sake of having a foundation. Mr. Whitaker was a very goal-oriented person, very interested in having things done, and he suggested that the foundation might go out of business, establish some goal, accomplish that goal, and then go out of business. And he suggested about 40 years. But when the foundation started, the governing committee hadn't even dedicated itself to biomedical engineering. The very first program was to give grants to young faculty members in biomedical engineering, and that program became very, very popular. Clearly there were a lot of people who were very good, and there was a need for helping young faculty members start their careers. And in about 1990, the foundation decided that maybe it will dedicate itself fully to bioengineering. They would recruit somebody who was a biomedical engineer, and I happened to be at the right place at the right time, and I was selected to join the foundation, which really turned out to be a phenomenal experience for me. I feel that that might have been the best biomedical engineering job in the country, if not in the world. And it was a tremendous feeling to be able to target education. So we never ever said that we are going to try to cure this disease or that disease. We really were embracing the field, and the field grew because of the biological advances. I did not have to take any life science courses because I got my degree in electrical engineering. And I remember taking only one semi-life science course. And I always regretted that I had not had any real biology background. I had a little bit here and there, but these days one has to have a lot of biology. So I think that the major change that I've seen is that biomedical engineering is no longer electrical engineering with an application to this field, or mechanical engineering, but it is a field of its own. It is based to a great extent on understanding biological mechanisms and how they relate to medicine. At least for many people, that is the primary interest. Use type 1 diabetes as an example. In my time, and in the early 1990s, people thought that engineers can do something about type 1 diabetes by designing sensors that measures glucose, and then program a computer that would infuse the right amount of insulin. And that is certainly a good approach, and just recently there has been quite a bit of publicity about some first practical application of this approach. But since then, all sorts of new, completely new approaches had arisen. For example, people wanted to transplant beta cells that generate insulin, but if they are transplanted from another organism, the body would reject it. So bioengineers have developed ways to encapsulate beta cells in such a way that the immune reaction is prevented. That was a sort of a second approach, and people are still working on that. The third approach, which is much more recent and completely different, and that is to persuade stem cells to differentiate and become beta cells. And certainly this is what I would call the biological approach, biological engineering approach, and my hunch is that it is going to be a third way of dealing with the same problem. So I had not foreseen this tremendous increase in the different technologies that can be used to solve the same problem. So I think that has been a welcome development. Another development that really, I'm not too sure that it is as welcome to me, but I think it is terribly important for the field, is to think that it is not sufficient to do something better. The word value is being used more and more. So if you develop a technology that costs $1 million, it's not possible for most people to use that technology. So bioengineering, I think, has to take into account not only the science, the technology, medicine, but also the cost of healthcare. And I think bioengineers need to worry about value. If they can develop something that is as good as something exists now, but it is 1/10 the price, that is value. If it is 10% better, but 5 times more expensive, I don't think that is value. So I think that the societal implications of biomedical engineering or bioengineering is going to be increasingly important. Follow not only your brain, but your heart as well. I think it is terribly important to do what you like to do and not what you think might be useful 10 years in the future. Nobody can predict, in my humble opinion, nobody can predict what happens 10 years from now. And as long as you do something that you like to do, you keep your eyes open for opportunities. It's terribly important. And be brave enough to take advantage of those opportunities, as long as those opportunities might lead to something that you would like to do. So don't overplan too much. I think if you have a good background, you are motivated, and you follow your desires in terms of career development, go for it. Don't overplan.